Welcome to the FileMaker opinion page. My name is Matt Navarre. In this video, we're going to talk about the 5 default fields. These fields have been existing in FileMaker since around FileMaker 16, and they're automatically made when you create a table. So I love them. I really think that this is an important idea to have these 5 fields. I've been using them since long before this feature was automatic. The fields that we have are a primary key, which is a UUID. I love UUIDs. And then we have creation and modification, account name, and timestamp. Okay, as I said, these are a best practice. However, I have issues with the default settings on the fields. So if we go into double click on a field and go into auto enter validation storage, we'll be looking at those. Most of the problems I have are from the perspective of a user who's not an expert at understanding and getting around obscure FileMaker error messages. I get that database administrators and developers have other goals and have other feelings about data validation. Let's take a look at the sample database. Okay, so we've got these 2 tables. Both of them have the default 5 fields. There's a simple relationship that creates records in the child table, primary key to foreign key. And what we're going to do is first we'll take a look at the settings on the primary key. We're going to spend some time there. So these ones are great. I have no problem with that. It's the validation tab where I have problems. So 2 things. 1, not empty, and 2, unique value. So the unique value is checked on the not empty is checked on all of the 5 fields. Okay. Let's import some data and kind of see what we see. So before we import data, here's how a record would normally work. Right, edit data, and it creates fields, no problem at all. I can see the fields are populated. I'm going to import a text file. And in this file, it just has 1 field that I'm going to import. And I'm not going to check this box to perform auto enter, which is a pretty common, let's just say, mistake that a user will make. When I import it, I see my new 12 records are there. And there's some behavior that the user is not going to like. If I try to edit the field and click out, I get an error that says created by is defined to require unique value. So that's actually created by, it's not even looking at the primary key yet. Also, if I try to make data, it won't let me do that. The problem here is that the user doesn't know how to get around this. And frequently what they'll do is they're just going to force quit FileMaker. And obviously you don't want that. So what you and I know that they can do is they can go to the records menu and click revert record. And then we're back to where we were, but it still doesn't really solve the problem, right? They can't edit data. Okay. Let's take a look at another setting in these 5 fields, and that's the unique checkbox. And the unique checkbox makes it do a search for every new record that you create to make sure that the value is there. That doesn't really have a cost until you get up to the 1,000,000 records or so. But the other thing that it automatically does is it turns on indexing. So when you create this field, these fields, the index is turned on automatically just on the primary key, which you might not need. Let's go back to a couple things in the settings here. So let's say, oh, okay, well, in this one, maybe what I need is just the modification to be set by the user. So I'll say, don't validate for the key or the creation, but do validate for modification, because I think that's important, right? So now if I make a new record, actually in this case it's going to work. So let's actually do an import. So I'll import that same file again. I will not turn on the automatic stuff. Okay, in this case, I'm not checking the values for the key. And so what you'd think would happen would be I can edit a value and it would let me do it. But now it's still not, because modification timestamp is set to require unique. So you would think that it would just allow you to do it, and because you're modifying the record, but it does not do that. Okay, next thing we're going to look at, I have to revert that again, is we're going to take a look at another setting in that primary key, and that's the storage, which is the language is Unicode. So I actually only noticed this setting somewhat recently, and I think there's some interesting things going on here. Okay, one thing you need to know about Unicode versus English is it's case sensitive. So the normal thing that you would do as a developer is you would use these five default fields, and then you'd make a foreign key field in another table, which you would do just as a regular text field. And you probably didn't know that the language is set to Unicode, and the language will be set to your default language, English in my case. Let's see what behavior we get when we do that. I'll make a new record. Okay, so it's making these fields. Everything's working normally because the fields have values. I'll switch to the B layout, and I'm going to modify the locally stored parent key by making it lowercase, just one letter. That breaks the link from the child record to the parent. Ready for something weird? It does not break the link from the parent to the child, and that's because of that language mismatch. So this is something that I didn't know until pretty recently, and this will be a real head scratcher to try to figure out if you see this problem in the real world. So let's fix this by going to table B and setting the foreign key to Unicode, which is at the very bottom. And now we've got the database completely broken, which is good, right? So it'll be broken in both directions. Okay. Let's talk about the modification and creation fields. So these are important fields. I love them. They're sort of the first step in basic logging. They track the client's time, by the way, not the server time. So if we take a look at the field definition under timestamp, it's going to auto-enter the creation date and time. There's not a option for server time or UTC time. And if you've got a solution that has people all over the world using it, that could be an issue because the records will look like they're made out of order. Matt Petrowski and some others have made great videos on addressing that. It uses a calculation rather than the default function to populate the values with like a UTC. Okay. What would be the harm in a child table if you didn't populate those keys? What would break? And then some other things that I think you can think about here is this. Let's say that you had a table. First of all, let me answer the first question. If you have these fields in a child table and there's records in the table that don't have values, then you're going to have the exact same problem that we had in A, right? So if I go to B and do an import of data here, and I've got a different file here, and I don't create automatic records, I do at least populate the foreign key in the attribute. If these fields are not set, I will not be able to edit any data. Now, a situation that could definitely happen is you have a table that's been around for a long time, and for whatever reason, it didn't actually have these 5 fields in it. So what frequently will happen is you're going to go to the table and you're going to copy these fields to the clipboard, and you're going to then paste them into the table. And then from then on, you'll know the information about the creation and modification. Probably there would be an ID in that other table, but this is really an issue for these 4 fields, created, modification. What will happen there, as you might predict, is that all of the data from before these were there will not be able to be edited but fields made after will be. So again, head scratcher for the user. So easy fix, you just basically turn this off in all of those 4 fields, and then you'll solve that problem. Okay, it's not just about import. Let's talk about one other thing that can cause a problem here. I'll escape and not save those changes. And that is a set field command. So if you import, obviously we can see that a key can't be set, but a problem can happen when you have a script that sort of misfires. So here's a script that we have, and it's a simple search. What it does is turns error capture on, goes to find mode, does a search for a specific field, and then does a find. Okay, if your script has an error in it, and I've made this mistake, where these two are switched, and then you debug that, what's going to happen is it's going to overwrite the timestamp field with nothing. This could also happen to a primary key, and basically any of these fields that you search on. So just by doing that, and now of course it's going to go to find mode and perform find, and you know the script will be broken in whatever the other way. But if the creation timestamp has this box checked, which I unchecked a minute ago, the record will no longer be able to be edited. So any method that deletes this data is going to cause you a problem. A lot of reverting of records today. Okay. Talked a lot about problems. Let's talk about some solutions. One way to solve this is to create a set of these fields that have the issues fixed. And then when you make a new table and FileMaker makes its 5 defaults, you can delete them and then put in the new ones, right? So let's go and let's say we have a table like this one. I'm going to copy and paste it. And then I'll call that one table C. This table has the same default fields. Let's make another table called table D. And this one I'm not going to duplicate. I'm just going to click create. And this has my version of these 5 fields, which don't have those boxes checked. Actually, yeah. So it doesn't have a not empty checked on anything. So these are the settings that I would recommend. So what you could do is you could copy these to the clipboard, go to table C, delete these ones, and add the new ones. Obviously, this would have to be done before you start populating the data, but that would be one way around it. In this, you just saw an example, a preview of the second way, right? How did I get these fields to be different upon my automatic creation? Well, there's a file called fmdefaultfields.xml. You can carefully modify it. It's kind of hidden in the system, but it's there. And in that file, you can change all the aspects of the 5 fields. There's some great articles you can find online. There's a blog from AppWorks, which is now DIS. Proofgeist has an article, and Matt Petrowski has a great video where not only does he talk about how to edit this one, but he talks about a lot of other fields that he creates on default when he makes a new table. Okay, I'm going to repeat. I am not advocating that we skip validation. I'm just saying that validation should perhaps be done at the scripting level, not at the data level. The practice I follow is to really only allow record creation by a script anyway. So which puts the control in one place. So I have a new record command, and I can set all the data right then, and I can make sure that it's not empty, etc. So I can do all my validation in the script, any kind of validation. And then I can show whatever type of an error that I want to the user, as opposed to an obscure FileMaker one that they can't get away from. So depending upon the severity of the error, I may let them actually just continue with the data, which is much better user experience, I think. Okay. Let's talk about a a script like this and what it might do to fix it. So I have a little script that's called validate and fix. And what this does is after a record is created, or anytime you're loading a record really, it checks to see if these fields are empty, right? So let's just do the example of what we just did. We imported and we forgot to set the key, which means we can't make any changes to the record. So if we go to a random record like this one, there's nothing I can do, right? We've established that. So I'm going to modify this and I'm going to put a trigger on record load. And I'm going to call that script. Okay, when I go to browse mode, I'm going to see what happens in script debugger. It's going to run this script. It's going to test to see if the primary key is empty, and it is. And then it's going to write a UUID to it. And the same thing for creation and modification. So if this error happens and you have some sort of a system like this in place, then every time you load a record that's otherwise empty, it fixes it upon that test. And then everything works as normal. Okay. Take a breath. and let's consider. So that was really a lot of fun for me anyway. I would ask, like, are these changes, would you consider them to be best practices to turn off the validation, the default validation? Maybe you do, but mostly what I'm aiming for here is food for thought. I think it's important to avoid confusing dialog boxes that the user can't get around. That's kind of where I started here, because I really want users to love using FileMaker apps. Thank you for watching, and please leave a comment if you have thoughts about this video.